Hi everyone. You are listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website forthosewelostpodcast.com and click on the contact button and reach me that way as well. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast. And if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. In this show, people share their stories of losing a loved one to COVID. As the pandemic continues, many of us feel the weight of the world wanting to move on and the pain of our loss that holds us tight. For us, there is no avoiding the ever-present reminder that we lost a loved one to COVID. It is with us every day, everywhere. What you hear in each story is grief, sadness, and love. We will more than likely talk about the vaccine and maybe a little bit about politics, and you may not agree. But I hope you'll keep listening. I hope you'll stay to the end of each episode and realize that each person who openly shares here has experienced deep grief over the loss of a loved one. And that's something we will all experience. We all love someone, we will all lose someone we love, and we will all grieve. These are the stories of those we lost to COVID. Thanks for being here with me. I've got a really great show coming up for you. Today, I'll be talking to Trish in Pennsylvania. Trish lost her dad, Jim, her Papa Bear, on January 4th, 2021. A few weeks after he passed away, Trish was testifying before her state Congress, and her action keeps going. She is the Yellow Heart Memorial Pennsylvania chapter lead, and she shares her dad's story as often as she can, because as long as she does that, he will live. For context, we recorded this episode on May 11th, 2022, which also happened to be her dad's birthday. Trish mentions an amazing amount of organizations that have helped her through what she calls her COVID roller coaster ride. She talks about the Yellow Heart Memorial, the Faces of COVID Yellow Heart drawings, the book It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine, and COVID Survivors for Change. All those links are in the show notes below. And one more thing, we do briefly talk about some potentially triggering medical practices in this episode. And with that, I'd like to welcome Trish to the show. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are talking today about your dad.
Yes.
Yes.
My Papa Bear.
Yeah, and he passed away on January 4th, 2021.
Yep, that's correct.
And today would be his birthday, is his birthday.
Yep, today would have been my dad's 66th birthday.
Mm. So you live in Pennsylvania.
I do. Yep.
Did your parents live near you?
Yeah, my parents live about they lived about a half hour from me. So they weren't too far.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is start where I start most episodes, and that is to go back to March of 2020 and have you talk for a little bit about how you first heard about COVID, and since you live near your parents, how it changed your family and what you did for those first few months.
Okay. So in March of 2020, it was actually funny. One of my friends, Erin, was getting married. She was supposed to get married in May. So we had her bridal shower the weekend before lockdown.
Wow.
And like her cousin who was also in the wedding had just got back from college for spring break. So we were like, oh, we're hoping you're not going anywhere, you know what I mean? But never really took a good look at what was going on, right? Because we were like, it wasn't really affecting us yet. So the weekend after was the weekend that we were like, oh, whoa, like this is a thing. And I actually said to my friend Erin, I was like, please tell me that your cousin is okay. Like she's not sick or anything, right? So everybody was fine. We had her bridal shower. It was great. People had like sniffles that we didn't even think of like anything being a problem until afterwards. Luckily from what we knew, no one, no, like nobody that was there had COVID, but it's the time of year where you've got allergies are starting to kick in and everything.
Hmm.
Um, so that kind of happened, and then lockdown started. And so when lockdown started, I started to research it a lot more than I had, prior. And I'm actually a type 1 diabetic. So we were automatically on the okay, we have to make sure that I'm going to be okay because I'm much more prone to, you know, eh, getting just sick in general.
Hmm.
And we always laugh because it's like if it can happen, it does happen to me. And I had actually ended up in the hospital at the end of December of 2019. I was really sick. Um, there was croup and oh goodness, what's it called? You know the thing that a lot of babies get when they're younger that they say adults can't get or don't get. I can't think of what it's called. What the hell is it called? RSV. That's what it
Oh,
is.
okay.
So RSV was going around my daughter's daycare center, and it's actually the same. My mom is the center director of a daycare center, so my mom was actually in the daycare center as well. So my daughter, it was right after Christmas. My daughter came home with RSV, and we were like, "Oh boy,
Yeah.
like this is not going to be good." And after Christmas, um it was probably the night after Christmas, the day after Christmas, I guess it was. She was up all night like slobbering, coughing all over me. It was horrendous. And I was like, "Oh boy, I'm like guaranteed I'm going to get this, right?" So sure enough, it was New Year's Eve actually, and I didn't feel well. And she didn't feel well, and my husband was like, "Trish, I think you need to go to the hospital." And I was like, If my husband is telling me to go to the hospital, that really means I should probably go to the hospital."
Hmm.
So I'm like, "Ugh, I don't want to." And he's like, "Trish, I think you need to go to the hospital." I was like, "Okay, fine." So my best friend actually came to get me so that my husband could stay home with my daughter. And so she took me to the hospital. So we're sitting around hanging out in the hospital. They did all of these tests on me. And they said, "Okay, well, it looks like you have the onset of pneumonia, but right now you definitely have RSV."
Oh,
And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I am like the only adult on the face of the earth that is hospitalized with RSV. Like, what is going on here?" But anyway, so I stayed over for a night, and they wanted to keep me an extra night, and I was like, "No, I'm going home." They had brought a woman in who had just had a mastectomy, and I was like, "Why is she in this room with me? Like, what is wrong with you guys? I'm leaving. Like, I'm not making this woman sick. Like, I'm leaving. I'm going home." So, they were like, "We have to promise you're gonna follow up with your doctor." I was like, "Yeah, I will definitely do that, but, like, I'm not staying with this poor woman." So I left. I ended up being okay, but I was sick for probably a good 2 months, right?
oh, wow.
Right, which brings me to, did I maybe have COVID?
Hmm.
But nobody was testing for it, right? Because it wasn't really a thing yet. So, and then when they were talking about, children getting RSV and COVID at the same time, I was like, that's like a very feasible thing, right?
Yeah.
but I don't know for sure, and no one will tell me for sure. So I had RSV. Okay. But I was hospitalized. So I was like, I just feel like that's really weird. So when this started to like be, come into like real life, like this is happening, we're all on lockdown. Um, we took the steps to make sure that we were safe. So like Easter happened, right? During those first couple weeks, and like we had Easter with face masks on, with the outside at my parents' house, with they had sliding glass French doors on their like deck. So through the glass of their sliding glass doors. That was how we had Easter. So they put like my daughter's Easter basket out, and like we just had a little picnic kind of thing. They were inside, we were outside. It was fine, right? So, I kept saying to my dad, who was also prone to getting pneumonia, I was like, Daddy, I really think that you should not work right now. And he gave a little pushback, and I was like, no, really, like this could be your life,
Hmm.
right? I was like, we need to make sure we're being safe.
And what did he do?
My dad was actually an HVAC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was in and out of all kinds of different places, but he had actually fallen off a roof at work 7 or 8 years ago, or I guess 9 or 10 now. But he broke the whole right side of his body.
Hmm.
So he had all kinds of like metal in him basically, right? Because they had to put him back together. So he had um his elbow, his shoulder, his leg, part of his pelvis was broke, cuz he broke literally it was the whole right side of his body. So he has all kinds of metal in him too. So I'm like, I really think like we need to tread on this lightly until we figure out like what's going to happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
So my dad didn't work for 3 months. He wouldn't collect because my dad was a very proud man. So he never collected in his life. And he was like, nope, I'm just like, I don't need to be paid. I'm just not going to work. So my dad didn't work. He stayed at home. He was kind of grumpy because we weren't, visiting because it was cold. So we would FaceTime him. My daughter would call him every day. And she'd go, hi, Papa. And then she'd hang up on him.
Oh.
So it used to drive him insane because he'd call me back and he'd be like, why does she do that? And I'm like, because she's 2.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, why else would she do it? Um, so it would drive him crazy. But my daughter and my father were super, super close. So that time that we weren't, with each other and interacting was really hard on him, just because he was afraid that like their bond would be broken a little bit. Because I mean, they were besties. Like if my dad walked into a room and my daughter was there, the world was Papa.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like she would smile, he would smile, and they'd both end up like cracking up laughing at each other. So they were really close, and my dad loved her to pieces. He was the kind of grandpa that I when we first got her, I was like, "Can we hold on a minute?" And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Dad, I'm not saying you were a bad dad, but you were never like this with me. Like, what is this?" And he's like, "Well, she goes home." I'm like, "Touche, she does."
Yeah.
So they were really close. So the time that we spent apart in March of 2020 was hard on everybody, and it was really until the summer, right? Once the summer came, I was like, all right, we can be outside on the deck with face masks on. I'm fine with that. So we would only like go in their house to go to the bathroom, and we would um eat, like we would eat at one end of the table outside, they would eat at the other end of the table, because my daughter couldn't wear a face mask at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because wasn't quite 2. She was 1.5. So she wasn't quite 2 yet, so she wasn't wearing a face mask. So it was really important for me to make sure that number one, she didn't get it and I didn't get it. Because I knew that it would be hard for me. And a great majority of the people who passed away during the first round of COVID were diabetics. So that's very scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And your mom works in a daycare. Does she manage a daycare or
Yeah, she's the center director of a daycare. So
wow.
she's like the boss lady.
Did she get to see your daughter when she was there?
Oh, so funny story. She did. Um, but that's actually also how my dad ended up getting COVID.
Hmm. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about that?
Yeah, so it was the beginning of December of 2020 and December 7th. So that's the day that my mom was exposed, which was also a Monday, which was also one of the days that my daughter goes to daycare. So my mom didn't tell me at first that anybody was even sick because they didn't know what it was. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So Evie was at school on the 7th, and then the 9th and the 10th, I guess the person who got was exposed was actually out of work. So she didn't come in. She wasn't feeling well, which I mean I can appreciate. But then on the 10th, my mom said that she felt like she had a sinus infection. So she didn't go to work. So then Friday morning comes along and she's like really sick, and she also gets a call from the person who was exposed, and they said I went to the doctor, I thought I had an ear infection, and I tested positive.
Oh,
So my mom was like, well, I guess that probably explains what I have. So I found out actually when I got the text message. They have like a system that sends out a text message when the center's closing or if they're closing early, like for a snowstorm or something. So it's like a mass text that goes out to everybody. So we got a text that said that someone was exposed to COVID and they would be closed.
wow.
So I get this test and I'm like, excuse me, what? So I call my mom and I'm like, what is going on right now? And she was like, there was a staff person that was exposed. I go, so are you getting tested, I hope? And she goes, yep, I already made an appointment. It's for Saturday morning. I said, okay. And then I was like, is daddy wearing a face mask? And she said, no. I told him that he should. And he told me no. And I said, well, put him on the phone. And she said, okay. So he gets on the phone and I go, Dad? And he's like, what? And I'm like, do you have a face mask on? And he goes, no. And I go, well, put the bleeping face mask on right now. And he goes, don't talk to me that way. I go, I understand, but you need to understand that just because she has it doesn't mean that you do.
Yeah.
I go, so put the face mask on and stop. I was like, I won't be able to live with myself if something happens to one of you, let alone both of you.
Mhm.
I was like, put it on. And he was like, okay, fine, fine. So he put it on. And at that point, like my husband actually works with someone whose father also passed away from COVID. And she actually had it at the same time as her dad. And she slept with her face mask on. Her and her husband both wore face masks. Her kids had face masks on. Her husband never got it. They were
Wow.
sleeping in the same bed. They had face masks on, and he never got it. So I'm telling this to my dad. I'm like, Dad, please put it on, please. And he was like, I will. Okay, I will. I was like, and when you eat, I was like, you eat at one end of the table, mom eats at the other end of the table, and like it'll be fine. You know what I mean? So it didn't really matter because my mom got tested by it was either Sunday or Monday. My dad was now sick too. Um So he was like, "All right, well, I guess I got it." So, And like he was saying, it's too late. Like, we've already been in this house for almost a week without face masks on. You know what I mean? Like, we had no idea. And I was like I said, now so put it on. Like, this is not a question. It's something you need to do. So then after he found out he had it, he obviously took it off. And then he called his doctor because he was hoping he could get some kind of like a steroid to try and, open his chest up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And his doctor ordered something. My aunt went and got it and picked it up and like left it outside for them. And then on, I think it was Wednesday, he called the doctor back and said, "I'm really having a hard time. I don't know what I should do." And Thursday, they decided that they were going to send a home health nurse to his house. So they sent a home health nurse. She looked him over and she was like, you need to be on oxygen. So they ordered oxygen. They delivered it on Friday. He was on oxygen for 2 days. And then that Saturday, we actually did like a Zoom call with my mom's family because we always do Christmas with my mom's side of the family the Saturday before Christmas, just because, everybody has so much going on trying to see families. So we always do it the Saturday before. So we decided we were going to do it on Zoom. So everybody drove their presents to whoever's house and left them outside. And then we did a Zoom call, and that's how, like, we opened our presents on Christmas, and it was fine. But I had called my mom before that Zoom call, and I was like, "How's Daddy doing?" And she was like, he hasn't really moved from his chair. Like, he's having a really hard time." And I said, "Okay." And Evie wanted to talk to him, so he had the oxygen on his nose, and we're sitting on the couch so that Evie could see his face, and he like waved to her and said hi, and she goes, "Ah," and she starts pointing to hit like her nose
Mm-hmm.
because she saw the oxygen tubes in his nose. And I said, "Yeah, Evie," I was like, that's Papa's oxygen. That's helping him breathe." And then he got really upset because he didn't want her to see him that way.
Mm.
So he was like, "I gotta go." You know what I mean? So we were like, "Okay, we love you, Papa. Feel better." And my mom was like, he basically slept. So then she did the phone call. She was starting to feel better. She said to her it just felt like she had like really bad flu. And as we know, it took my dad out. But then on Sunday morning, I got a call from my mom and she was like, I'm driving Daddy to the hospital right now."
Oh.
And I was like, "Okay, like what happened?" And she was like, "Trish, he woke up this morning and he had no idea what was going on." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, my mom was like, "He was like delirious. Like he had no idea." And I was like, "Okay, well, take him and let us know how he makes out." So she took him and she tried to walk him to the door. And she said to them, I've already had COVID. I know that's what it is." But they were like, "No, you still can't come in." So she helped him out of the car and let him walk in the hospital doors, and that was the last time that my mom really saw my dad alive.
Mm.
And then that was the 19th of December. So, or I'm sorry, that was the 20th. So then that night, they didn't have like an open room. So they decided they were going to keep him in the emergency room. So he was in the emergency room. And then when he got a room, my mom said he called at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. When they had a room open up, he was moved to a room. So he called my mom once he got a room and he actually said to her, you know, "Yeah, I have COVID. I'm okay. But don't be calling here because there's just a lot going on. There's so many people around here." So he's like, "Don't bother them." So I laughed because that is absolutely something my father would say. So I was like, okay, like he's got this. They're gonna take care of him. They'll get him all squared away, and he'll be good, right? You have to think positive. How else are you gonna think?
Yeah.
So then Monday morning, that mama had called me to tell me that. So I said to her on the phone, I go, he didn't tell me not to call, so I'll call him when I'm done with work. So she said, okay. So after work on Monday, I call my dad and he answers the phone and it didn't even sound like him. And I go, Papa? And he goes, yeah. And I go, like Jim? And he was like, yeah, Trisha, it's me. And I said, oh, okay. And like I asked how he was feeling, and you couldn't really talk. He was on like the high flow oxygen and stuff. So it was really hard for him to talk, and you could tell that he was definitely struggling. And I tried to get Evie to say hi, Papa, but she wouldn't talk to him because she couldn't FaceTime with him.
Oh,
So
yeah.
she couldn't see his face, so she wouldn't talk. Because he told my mom that he wasn't taking his cell phone. And I said, why would he do that? Like and she was like, I I I don't know. He just you know him, he doesn't want to take his cell phone. He's just let it go. And I said, "Well, what if that's the only way we can talk to him?"
Yeah.
I was like, I've heard horror stories of people wanting to call their loved ones to like FaceTime with them and they can't.
Mhm.
So I was like, why would he do that? And she was like, Trish, if I need to take it down there, if we get to that point, I will take it down there and I will make sure that he has it. And I said, okay. So we kind of walked through that. So we talked to him. He, Evie wouldn't say anything to my dad because she couldn't see him. So I said, okay, Daddy, well, we were just calling to say, hi, and we love you. And you got to get better so you can get out of there. And he said, I know, I love you too. And he hung up. And that was the last conversation I had with my dad.
Ugh.
And it breaks my heart. But at the same time, I'm so incredibly glad that I got that moment. Because what if I hadn't?
Yeah.
So we just kind of let it rest, right? We didn't really hear anything from him, and we knew he didn't feel well and he couldn't really talk. So and he wouldn't take his phone, so he couldn't text either, you know what I mean? Which my dad wasn't a big texter anyway. Like if you got a text from him, it was like maybe once or twice a year. Cuz he really didn't like cell phones. So it was what it was. So then on Tuesday morning at oh gosh, it was probably like quarter to 8 or so. My mom called and said Daddy agreed to go on a ventilator last night, and she burst into tears. And I said, "Okay, mom, let's work this out." And she's like, "What do you mean let's work this out?" And I said, "Well, he's on a ventilator. Okay, so it's going to help him breathe, right?" And she was like, "No, Trish, you don't understand. He's on a ventilator." And I said, "Oh no, mom, I understand. But we have to think about this as I don't think that my dad would have agreed to go on a ventilator if he didn't think he was going to get off it.
Yeah.
And I don't think like he must have really been struggling to say, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that he agreed to do what he thought was right and what he thought would save him.
Yeah.
But that was the morning of the 22nd. So then Christmas was coming. Um, so I called the hospital. I kind of became like the advocate for my dad.
Yeah.
So I was up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning looking at case studies, just trying to kind of see what's going on, see if they're doing everything that everyone everywhere else is, you know what I mean? Just and literally, I mean, I think the doctors probably thought I was slightly insane because I'm like, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, we did that. Yeah. I'm like, did anybody check his vitamin E? And they were like, what? And I'm like, no, I read it in a case study. Can you check it? Because when he fell off the roof, his vitamin E was low. So it was actually low. So they ended up giving it to him. I was like, okay, well maybe I didn't save him, but maybe I did. You know what I mean? Like who cares? So and I think that was very much probably the case with most people, just because we were all scrambling as a community to try and save the person that you love, and
Mhm.
we're over 1 million people now.
Yeah,
That's insane.
it is.
Like, and I can't even justify that to people because I'm like, this could have been stopped before it started, and it wasn't. So now, you have I don't want to say that it's completely a political thing, but just a mankind thing. You know what I mean? Like, why is it that I have to beg people to wear a face mask? You know what I mean? Like if be even before this, if you had cancer and I knew that you were getting chemo and I knew that you might be, more susceptible to getting deathly ill if you come in contact with the germ that I have that you don't, I would put a face mask on. Like that's not even that's like a no-brainer to me. So because people have just lost I feel like every ounce of empathy in their bodies, over 1 million people have passed away just in the United States. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
And heartbreaking. You know what I mean? And you realize it when Christmas Eve was the first time that or I'm sorry, Christmas Day was the first time that we were able to FaceTime with my dad. So I had called one of the nurses and I said, "Hey, do you guys have an iPad, or like, can I bring you my dad's iPhone so that we can, FaceTime with him just to talk to him, so he even hears a familiar voice?" And she was like, "No, we have one." And I said, "Okay, well, can we like set up a date?" And she was like, "Sure." So Christmas Day, we called my dad, and they took the iPad in, and my mom was here with me when I called, and we just talked to him and, told him that we loved them and what we did for Christmas. And he put together this trampoline for Evie, my daughter. And my mom was like, he was swearing up and down when he was putting that trampoline together. So she better love it. So we were laughing and we were like, Papa, Evie loved the trampoline. um, and like she does flips on it and stuff. So like that day, that Christmas morning, she was so we're like she loved the trampoline, and as soon as my mom like was able to really take a minute and look at him, she was like, "Oh no, 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 I can't see this." And I said, "Okay, well, you don't look,
Yeah.
just talk to him, don't look at him." So from then on, I called. Every single day, I would call the nurse and ask what was a good time, for them. And then we would set up a date and they would take the iPad in the room and they would leave it there, and I would tell him about my day, and then I actually started reading him a book. So I started to read him a book. We got about halfway through. So I'd read him a couple chapters a night, and then I would pray with him, and then I would hang up, and then they would go in and get the iPad. And we did that literally up until January 4th.
Mm.
And in the process of all of that, I actually also, on my husband's phone, I took a recording of Abby saying "Papa." She kept saying "Papa, Papa, Papa," and I would play that for him every night as well.
Wow. What book did you read?
Oh shoot, what was the name of it? It's actually a book about a woman who, I believe she was from Russia, And it's a book about how basically her will to push through life, she was captured and held against her will, but she fought back, and she said, God saved me. So I decided that that was an appropriate book because he was literally in the fight of his life.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of it. I have it out on my bookshelf. But I actually told my Aunt Patty, because she was the one that told me that I should read this book. She was like, it's a really good book. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna read this. And so I did, and like I said, we read a couple chapters a night, and it wasn't necessarily even for him to take notice that I'm reading the book, but for him to be able to hear my voice. Because you can only say, so many things before you're out of things to say.
Yeah.
So that was a trying time as well. And I guess I felt like I was helping to, I don't know, make him not feel so alone.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be so hard to be in there in a hospital all by yourself and only see people that are all gowned up with the masks on and the gloves, and just it's got to be so scary. I cannot even imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he was paralyzed and heavily sedated when he was intubated, but and on the days that he was prone, when I would call, they would actually say to me, I don't want you to see him in the prone position. And I was like, why? And they said, it's just not, I wouldn't want that to be how you would remember your dad.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well then I'll just point me to the ceiling. I'll just talk to him. So we did that. And then on the morning of the 4th, I had gone back to work after vacation, and my mom knew that I would call the hospital because I called the hospital every morning and then every night, and I would like get an update and just say, how's he doing? What were his levels? What was his, ox rate? All of that. Like I'm like, I could probably treat a COVID patient at this point. And for real, it was bad.
Yeah.
So they put a doctor on the phone, and I said, hi, I was just calling to kind of get an update on my dad, see how we made out last night. And like, you have to understand I call it like it's a COVID ride. When you have someone who's in the hospital who is intubated in the hospital, it's a roller coaster ride. Like, some days you're like, okay, well, they were able to, you know, go lower on the oxygen levels. Like, we're doing better. You know what I mean? Turn the oxygen down. All right, this is good. But then the next day, they'd be right back up. And then they'd be pretty good for, 2 days. And then the day after, they're right back up. So it's this roller coaster ride of hope, right? If you're turning the oxygen down, you're feeling a little better about it, but then it's right back up. So you're like, oh my gosh, like, is this it? So it's a crazy ride that I would not wish on my worst enemy.
Hmm.
And on the morning of the 4th, I called, and I got the doctor, and I said, okay, where are we at? And he said, I think you need to decide on comfort measures.
Oh.
And I said, so I go, don't sugarcoat this. And he said, okay, I won't. And I said, you've done absolutely everything you can, and there is nothing else you can do that is going to help this man.
Mm.
And he said, no. And I said, okay, then I need to call my mom. And he said, I actually already called her this morning. And I said, okay, well, I guess I got to call and have another talk. So I called my mom, and I go, it's funny when she like gets me frustrated, I'll call her Susan. So I go, Susan, and she goes, yes. And I go, is there something you needed to tell me? And she burst out crying, and she was like, "I couldn't be the one to tell you. I couldn't
Oh.
do it." And I said, "Okay, well, we're there now. Like, we need to make some decisions." And I said, I need your help with this because these aren't decisions that I had ever talked to my dad about."
Yeah.
And she said, "I I know that he wouldn't want to be a vegetable." And I said, "Okay." And she said, and we had had like a talk, previous to this one. And she told me that I really had to be okay with it. And I said, "I get that, but I also need to know what he would want." And when we had had one conversation prior to the last conversation we had, and she said, because we were talking, I was like, "Could we trach him? Like, would that work?" And that was one of the things I had called the hospital to ask about, and they were like, "We can't trach him because he can't hold his breath long enough to even do that."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, well, I guess that's out of the question then." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the hospital was great. They really did try everything. And, my mom was like, he doesn't want to be a vegetable. You know what? He doesn't want a lesser quality of life than he had prior to going into the hospital. And I said, "I understand that, but like, does that mean it's time?" You know what I mean? Like, how do you know? Like, I feel like there were so many other people, not so many, but a few at least other people who, fought the good fight. They were on ventilators for or an ECMO machine or were whatever for a couple months, but they eventually were able to leave. So I was like, why can't that be my dad?
Yeah.
And so I said to her, like, if this is what you both had spoke about at some point, and you know what he wants, then I think it's more important to do what he wants than what I want. I was like, cuz if we're keeping him alive and he never pulls through, like, was it worth I don't know if you're suffering when you're on a ventilator.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you feel. I'm assuming not much cuz you're paralyzed, right? So I was like, I don't know. I guess that's what you do then. And I said, I can call the nurse and let her know that, that's the decision that we're making. And she said, okay. And so I called and I got the nurse and I said, I I guess we're moving forward with comfort measures. And she said, okay, well, are you guys going to want to come to the hospital? And I said, if we could, yes. And she said, you can go in, you're going to have to be in full PPE. You can't take gloves off. You have to be double masked. And I said, okay, whatever, that's fine. And she said, I wouldn't go racing, down the Casey or anything, which is one of the highways here. But she was like, you don't have much longer, even with him on a ventilator.
Mm.
And at that point, I knew we were making the right decision.
Yeah.
So, my Aunt Patty, who was amazing, during this whole thing, actually was staying with my mom. She stayed past like, she went home for Christmas and then came back just because she didn't want my mom, to be alone. So she came and, stayed with my mom, and she was actually supposed to leave that morning, but as she was packing up to leave, the hospital had called my mom. So I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I should see if Aunt Patty's still there, right? And if she is, maybe she'll drive my mom because I didn't want my mom to drive herself." So she said that, she would. And I said, "Do you know about my dad?" And she said, "I do." And I said, "Why didn't she call me?" And she was like, "Trish, she was just so shook up. Like she didn't know, like I don't think that it set in that this was it,
Hmm.
but I also, like, she couldn't deliver that news to you." And I'm an only child, so like that's my mom and my dad and me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That's it. So once you realize that, like, walls are crumbling and the people that you had that were like your cheerleading squad, it's hard to agree to let go of that. Um, so we went to the hospital, we got all gowned up, and we went in, and when we first got there, you could see him through the glass window at the hospital, like in his room. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And my mom was like, "What?" I'm like, "Mom, he looks horrible." So I hadn't seen my dad for at least 2 days. I think it was exactly 2 days prior to the fourth, because both times that I had called, he was prone.
Hmm.
So I hadn't seen his face or anything. He was just so swollen. Like, his mouth was cracked open, his tongue was like bloated and hanging to the side of his mouth. Like, it was bad. And like, it breaks your heart. And like, I didn't know what to say. And I like, there's so many things that you want to tell somebody, right?
Hmm.
And I had the chance to be there with him, but at the same time, the people that were robbed of that, because that's heartbreaking as well. You know what I mean? I'm like, I had the opportunity to be there and hold his hand, but it was a horrible opportunity.
Yeah.
And my mom actually told me to bring the book that I was reading him with me. So I read him some of the book, and they turned the ventilator off as soon as we went into the room. So I started reading him a book, but I couldn't breathe with the two N95s on.
Yeah.
So it was really tough for me to breathe. So I only read maybe like a page and a half or so. And my mom kept telling him sorry. And I
Oh.
was like, "Mom, this isn't on you." And then I actually brought the recording of Evie saying "Papa."
Hmm.
So I played it in his ear, and like a minute after that, he ended up passing away.
Oh.
But I was glad that I got to be there and hold his hand. But I mean, it was a really
Yeah.
tough moment. And like I said to my mom, I don't even know if I'm as heartbroken for me as I am for Evie, because she was losing this person who, when I tell you they were besties, like, I'm not even embellishing that at all. I was like, I just think I'm more heartbroken for her than me, because I had him for 38 years.
Yeah. Yeah. She had him for two.
Right. And there were a good 2 years. Like, he was supposed to retire in May because he was turning 65, so he was going to retire. He had all of these plans. He was going to take Evie fishing, and he made all of these like birdhouse prints. So they were going to build birdhouses, and like, he was just excited to be able to enjoy life.
Yeah.
So his plan was to retire and do all of the things that he loved to do because he had, the time to do them.
Yeah.
And that never came to fruition. But He lived a good life, and I had him for a while, and I can't help but think that even if it was COVID that took him, I'm glad it didn't drag out forever. I mean, he was on a ventilator for 2 weeks, but he fought, and that's all. Once people get COVID, like, I feel like that's all that you can hope for, is that they have enough will and drive in them to try and fight it.
Yeah.
And I've come out on the other side of this. I was so angry when my dad first passed away. I'm like, this could have been stopped. Like, they had to wear face masks at work, but like, they eat at tables. You know what I mean? They're kids. And staff eat lunch too.
Yeah.
So they take their face masks down to eat lunch with the kids, and you know people just don't put it into perspective that you're literally possibly taking someone's life. And like I said, so angry. I was so angry. I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. And my friend Kim, who works with my husband, who also lost her dad, I reached out to her the day that or on Christmas Eve, and I had never spoke to her in my life. And as soon as I said hi to her, I started bawling, because I was like, my dad agreed to go on a ventilator. Like, I need somebody to talk me through this.
Hmm.
So she did. You know what I mean? And now we're friends. And she introduced me to COVID Survivors for Change and Yellow Heart Memorial. So I spoke to our senators, probably 2 weeks after my dad passed away,
Wow.
asking for help with the COVID bill. And I I, I was angry. And I I was literally like, you need to do something. People are dying. This isn't fair. People who had years of life left
Yep.
are dying. Like, this is unacceptable. So that bill ended up passing. So yay. And then I decided I wanted to do a COVID memorial in May. So I did a COVID memorial. Senator Casey came and spoke.
Mm.
Um, my congresswoman came and spoke. The mayor came and spoke. So we had a community of people in the area who I wasn't necessarily aware of. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
the reality of this is that COVID has touched many lives, right? I feel like almost everybody at least knows someone who lost someone at this
Yes.
point.
I agree.
So when you do memorials and you get people together, even for just that hour of time, you feel like you're not so alone.
Hmm.
And I definitely don't feel as alone as I did when this first happened. I was feeling alone just because, number one, I'm an only child, right? So I'm like, my mom, it's me and my mom.
Hmm.
And I mean, I was literally begging my mom to move in with us. I'm like, "Mom, we'll redo the basement, we'll make it your bedroom, like, it'll be fine." I was like, "You you know what I mean?" I'm, like, twisting her arm, and she's like, "Trish, no." And I'm like, "Why? I just wanna make sure you're okay." She's like, "I'm fine, I will be fine." And I'm like, "No, but I just wanna take care of you, like, nothing can happen to you." So I guess I was feeling like if I knew where she was and I knew what she was doing, I would be able to save her, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started grief counseling because, like I said, I was super angry, and I've worked through a lot of those emotions, but there are some days that I'm just like, "It's me and my mom. That's it." And I mean, you have the rest of your family, but I literally said to my mom, I was like, "There has never been a time in my life that I ever, like, wished for brothers and sisters."
Mm.
I was always okay being an only child. I had cousins that were my age, so, we played together and stuff. So I never, ever wished to have brothers or sisters or anything until my dad died. And I was like, I wish there was just somebody else who knew what was going on inside of me. So I've made a lot of great friends through Yellow Heart Memorial. I'm actually the Pennsylvania lead for Yellow Heart Memorial, and you just, out of COVID, the most beautiful thing that I've gotten is that there's this whole extended family that I have now that I never knew I wanted or needed,
Yeah.
but now I do. And there are days when I um, call Karen Ernst, who is Hannah Ernst's mom. She's the 16-year-old who was drawing the faces of COVID pictures.
Yes.
I'll call Karen and I'm like, I need to talk. And you just burst into tears, but they get it.
Yeah.
She gets it. Or Rosie Davis, I'll call Rosie and I'll be like, "Rosie, I'm having a day." And we'll talk, and there are days, like, I know that Mother's Day's hard for her. So last year I called her on Mother's Day and she was crying before I even called her. And I was
Oh,
like, "Let it out. Just talk to me." You know what I mean? Like, what do you need? Tell me. Um so you get a wonderful, beautiful family that you never knew you wanted or needed.
yeah. I agree.
And I think that my dad would be proud of the fact that I didn't take the loss of his life as, like, being sucked into a hole of darkness,
Yeah.
and that I actually did something with the upset that it brought me, the upset and the pain that it brought me, to move forward and try and help other people.
Yeah.
And me and my dad always laughed. He was counting down the days until Trump was out of office, and then he was counting down the days until he retired. He had a
Yeah.
calendar. He's literally, like, crossing things off. Um, so I literally, before he passed away, I'm when one of the nights I was talking to him on FaceTime, I was like, "Daddy, you have to make it because Biden is coming." I'm like, "He's coming." I was like, "And you can you'll be able to get vaccinated soon. That's coming." So I guess I, like, kept trying to con him into fighting a little bit harder just to see the other side of the Trump administration. But so I like to believe that my dad would find comfort in the fact that I have found comfort in helping other people to put their grief into action and to help a grieving community that, I mean, really, people think that, death is all the same. They're like, "Oh, it's just another life." And I'm like, "No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a very different death. It's a very different loss. It's a very different kind of anger."
Mhm.
And I literally wish that no one else in the world would have to experience the loss of a parent or brother or sister or husband or loved one of any kind to COVID, because it's truly heartbreaking that, people can't just find it in their hearts to do what's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple of questions
Yeah, sure.
that I jotted down. Were you able to have a funeral or a memorial service for your dad?
Yeah, so my dad actually wanted to be cremated. So we had him cremated, and then my dad was actually Catholic. My mom and myself are Methodist. So we had a mass in the Catholic Church, and that was what we did as his it was more like a memorial mass kind of thing than I would say a funeral.
Yeah. It's nice that you were able to do that, though.
Oh yeah, there are so many other people that didn't even there are people who had lost people in 2020 that still haven't been able to have anything.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely, extremely grateful that my dad didn't, pass away in the first part, like the first round of COVID, because it was so new and people just didn't know what to do. And I'm grateful that I knew that I should ask to FaceTime. You know what I mean? I'm grateful that I even got to FaceTime. There's so many people that they were promised a FaceTime call and they never got it, or they only got one where, I mean, every single day I called him and I was like, "Okay, are we good for this time?" And they were like, "Yep, okay." So that's what I would call, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I'm incredibly grateful that I got all of those things because there are so many other people who didn't didn't even get what I would consider to be humane. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's insane.
Mhm. And another question I have is, do you talk to your mom about how she's feeling and how is she doing?
Yeah, so, I I talk to my mom every day, I call her every day, and actually at it was Easter, we were sitting at the table, and I was sitting at one end of the table, and she was sitting at the other end of the table, and I looked at her and I said, "Are you having a moment?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay,
Mhm.
take a minute." And today like I had told you before, today's my dad's birthday, so my mom came and we today, or Friday is her 65th birthday, so we celebrated her birthday today as well, because I'm off today. So, I got her flowers and I also got a flower to put we planted a tree with some of my dad's ashes in it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's right on the side of our house. So I got a flower for Ebby to put like by his tree.
Mhm.
So when my mom was here, we went outside and we sang my dad happy birthday, and we put a yellow flower by his tree.
Oh.
And she got teary-eyed when we started that. I was like, "Do you wanna go out with us and put the flower on the tree?" And she was like, "Of course I do." And she stood up and I go, "It's a moment."
Yeah.
So I mean, she when my dad first died, she she cried a lot, and she still there are still some days that are really bad. She was like, "I woke up this morning and it was just a really bad morning." And I was like, "That's okay, right?
Yeah.
They were married for 45 years."
Oh.
You know what I mean? I was like, "That's okay. You could yeah, you were with my dad m more than half of your life." You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have days, and I have days, you know what I mean? Like, we all have days. And I said, "You know, you just need to find something that's comforting to you." And I had, dogs made with my dad's clothes, so I had he had a Boston Red Sox t-shirt, and I like the Red Sox, so I had my dog made out of his Red Sox t-shirt, and my daughter's is made out of one of his hunting, fleeces, and I had my mom's, made out of, part of that fleece in one of his flannel shirts.
Wow.
So we all have one. Yeah, so I said to my mom, you know, "Hug your dog, take a minute, and just breathe." You know what I mean? Like, the only thing that you can do now is think about the times that you had, and, you know, you wait till you see him again, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You have to hold on to that. And I actually read the book It's Okay If You're Not Okay.
Oh, someone was just telling me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book, and in that book, it says that you should if you're like, I was saying to my mom, like, I would like to go to, a medium or something just to I just want to make sure he's okay.
Yeah.
And in this book, it said you should you should ask out loud. You should say to them, this is exactly what I said. I said, Dad, I need to know that you're okay. If I hear somebody talking about birds other than my mom, because my mom talks about birds sometimes, I'll know you're okay. Next morning, I'm sitting at my desk working, and what do I hear but Evie and my husband in the bathroom talking about birds.
Oh, wow.
And I laughed and I said, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we actually had a family friend who was friends with her father was friends with my grandfather. They were best friends, and he actually would come up to the Poconos every summer and bring the whole family. And this woman's best friend had called her and said, I need to tell you something. I don't know what you need to do with it. I just need to tell you this. And she said, I saw your father and Jim's father at a table having drinks, and your dad made eye contact with me and he said, you have to tell them that Jimmy's okay.
Oh,
And she said, I don't know what you want to do with that. I just want to let you know that happened. So I guess she Googled my dad's name and found out that my dad had passed away and wrote a letter to my dad's sister and, said that she was so sorry. She had no idea if she would have, come to the mass had she known. And in a separate note, she said, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but I just need you to know this.
wow.
So he's okay.
Yeah, I recommend going to a psychic if you ever feel like you want to. I did that.
Did you?
I did. I did some research and I found somebody locally. I did not tell her anything ahead of time at
Yep.
all. And she did pick up on my mom right away. But one of the moments I remember most clearly is my mom had this thing where she would purse her lips when she was upset.
Okay.
We called them the Nana lips because she would purse her lips and make this face and sort of squint her eyes when she was upset about something.
Yep.
And this woman was talking about something, and then she asked about my dad. And I said something about him. And then she said, well, your mom. And then she made this face. She made the exact face that my mom used to make with the lips and the eyes and everything. And I just thought, oh my gosh, my mom used to make that face.
Yep.
It was so comforting. It was really comforting to me.
Yeah. I do want to go, but I want to make sure that it's someone who's reputable for starters.
Yes.
And I think my mom will go with me because what's the medium from New Jersey?
Oh, yeah. The Long Island.
Medium, yeah, her.
Yeah.
I actually submitted a thing for her show because there's like a 3-year waiting list.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, uh, I that would be amazing. And my mom, she was actually in the area, and my mom was like, "Well, why don't we go?" And I was like, "Mom, you are aware of the fact that there's like 1,000 other people in the room. Number one, hello COVID, and number two, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a reading."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Yeah, all right." So I think that we will eventually, and I do think that it would bring a lot of comfort to my mom because I I honestly think that my dad would come through and tell her that she needs to stop blaming herself
Yeah.
because I mean I've said to my mom, I'm like, Mom, I don't blame you. So if I don't blame you, you shouldn't blame you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You went to work, you were doing your job. That's what happens. The reality of it is that people weren't taking COVID seriously, and that's what happens. So, if people would just quarantine the way that they should and wear face masks when they should, like there aren't signs anymore that say you need to wear a face mask. If I go into a store or something, I put a face mask on. You know what I mean? Like I
Mhm.
don't understand why. And now you go places and literally no one has them on. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I mean, I the whole experience has changed me as a person. I've gotten a lot of hateful I've seen the other side of people, I guess is what I should really say. I've been told that I manifested my dad's death
Oh.
because I said that, I knew very early on that if myself or my dad got this, we would probably not be in a good place.
Mhm.
And I said, and here we are. And so I manifested my dad's death.
Oh.
Um, and I mean, I've lost friends
Mhm.
because I've said that, in order for me to spend time with them, they need to get tested
Yeah.
and wear a face mask. So, I mean, I've definitely seen the other side of people through all of this, which, you know, I guess when you're in the middle of it, it is what it is, and you find out who are really your people.
Yeah.
And like I said, I could have never imagined that I needed or wanted the people that I got through this whole, journey. I would have never imagined that I would have had the support of people that know me just as well, people who have known me all my life now. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I'm very grateful for the COVID community of people, for sure.
Yeah, me too. The last question I ask everybody is, what do you tell people who tell you COVID isn't real?
Ah, my favorite question. So I know a lot of Trumpers. I call him number 45. And as you know, the majority of the people who are asking such a question are affiliated with him in some way. So I will say I would say if COVID isn't real, why did Trump end up in the hospital? Why did he get vaccinated and not tell anybody? And if it were you and you were sitting in a hospital on a ventilator with no one because no one is allowed to be near you, how would you feel if you were the one that would die?
Mhm.
What would that do to you? Would that be heartbreaking to you? How would that affect your family? Would they be upset? Because even if you think that that maybe might have a teeny weensy little chance of happening, why can't you wear a face mask? Is it hurting you? Are you, like I said, I don't understand it. I don't understand why someone would say it isn't real. Like I've had people who say, well, oh well, I guess your dad's lungs just weren't working. I'm like, no. Uh, First thing on his death certificate is COVID pneumonia.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there will always be naysayers. There will always be people who think it was made up. But I can tell you that I had a very lively 64-year-old dad at the beginning of December of 2020.
Mhm.
And I can tell you that on December 4th, I didn't.
Yeah.
The last time I saw my dad was December 6th because we went to my parents' house every Sunday. So the last time I saw my dad alive and talking and himself was December 6th. So if if I could have changed December 7th, I would have. You know what I mean? I would, If I could change that in any way, I would. So if it were you, would you still be saying the same things that you are right now?
Mhm.
And I know they wouldn't, because nobody seems to care or even, like, give it a thought until it directly affects you. And by directly, I mean, like, your spouse, your parents, your brother, your sister. Like, other than that, people are like, "Eh." Like, a family member is the person who told me I manifested my father's death.
Oh.
So, I'm like, no." Me saying that there's a real possibility that my father or myself would be in a bad place if we got this is because we're both prone to getting pneumonia. I literally get walking pneumonia, like, once a year, but I haven't since I've been wearing face masks. So, I'm like, that's facts, right? Science is facts,
Yeah.
and science changes because as things change and there are different variants, it it changes, it's a fact, and facts can change. Science changes. Your belief will not change until it literally is knocking at your door,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to present that to people to make them more aware. I try to be understanding of the fact that people who didn't experience it just have no idea, and they don't know what to do with the whole situation, you know what I mean? Because it hasn't affected them, so it's nothing.
Yeah.
But the second that, it really happens to somebody, it's usually like, "Oh my gosh, I never even realized." But at this point, we're over the United States is at over 1,000,000 people.
Mhm.
That's it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to even it's hard. I don't even it's I don't even have the words for it. How do you quantify 1,000,000 people and then all of their family?
Right.
Yeah.
And the doctors and nurses that literally, I mean, I have thanked the hospital team that took care of my dad about 1,000,000 times. I've sent them food, a a baskets at Christmas, you know what I mean? Like, these people show up every single day, and they take care of people that they know if, I don't know, their hands aren't washed correctly or they accidentally breathe something in incorrectly, like, that could be their life.
Yeah.
So, forget about even the people who have passed away. You have people who are actively doing their job for a paycheck. They're being exposed to this illness still to this day. Like, how do you even put that into words? I just wish people would think about other people more than they do, because if it were your life, I can tell you that the millions of people who have lost someone to COVID would do for you what you should have done for them.
Yeah, well said.
And so I'll keep trucking on, because you can't lose hope that maybe, even if it's just one person.
Mhm. Is your Yellow Heart Memorial taking names still?
Oh yeah, there are new people all the time. So I actually have recently we decided we were going to put a permanent memorial in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is around where I'm from.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're having the hearts printed on aluminum, and like you can purchase them at like different, like, levels, because there's a bottom level and then there's ones that hang from the top and stuff like that. So we're still doing that, and you can add your loved one's name to any memorial anywhere.
Okay. And is that through the website or through the group on Facebook or both?
Well, I mean, it's both. So anything
Okay.
that is on the website, we typically will talk about on the Yellow Heart Memorial page.
Okay.
And it's an amazing group of people that, even if you're having a bad day and you're like, "Hey, I'm having one of those days," we all have them, so everybody gets it.
Yeah.
And people are supportive, because the reality of it is, I mean,
Yep, I do.
there are days that you wake up and you're like, why?
Yeah.
And then there's days that you get through the day, but you still think about them all the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So while they're gone, they will truly never be forgotten. And I've said at the end of every speech that I've given, as long as I live, I will tell your story, because as long as I tell your story, you will live.
Yep.
And my daughter, we say her prayers every night, and she blows Papa a kiss in heaven. So talk about them. Talk about them till people are sick of hearing about them. You know what I mean? Because as long as you're still talking about them, they're never far away.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Trish.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Happy birthday in heaven to your dad.
Thank you so much.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the notes below. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcasts, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this show finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.